Hey good people, hola mi gente, MsMalcolmHughes here. Welcome back. For those of you who are familiar, I do a lot of book reviews and sometimes short story reviews and sometimes news article reviews here on the channel. But I'm currently on this journey of reading different religious texts. And with that, I've decided I want to come in periodically, maybe chapter by chapter, maybe book by book, maybe, I'm not sure how I'll do it, but whenever I feel inspired, I want to come on here and share some of my thoughts with you all about the religious text I'm currently reading. I want to add a caveat at the very beginning. It's not about trying to dissuade or persuade anyone of anything. That's not why I'm reading these texts. I just want to know what they all say. So I will come here and I will discuss them in the way in which I do. Not to offend anyone, not to discredit anyone's beliefs, not to convince anyone of anything. Just to discuss them and to share my personal thoughts and my personal ideas with you all. If that is something that interests you, please keep watching. Today I am going to discuss a little bit of Genesis. So let's get into it. All right, so for those of you who may not be familiar, I do have the New King James Version of the Holy Bible here. One of the, I believe if not the, definitely one of the most published and well-read books in the world. And so Genesis is like the origin story. Right now, I just want to share my thoughts on, so far I've read the first 3 chapters of Genesis. I have a background as being Baptist and Muslim based on just my family, so I do have some history of this. It's not my first time reading this, but I want to read it in its totality and read other religious texts. So let's share just some of my thoughts. So the first part of Genesis really is the history of creation. And, you know, I just took my notes of like what happened over the 6 days, you know, before God rested on the 7th day. But then I had some questions. One big question, I was like, so is outer space heaven? And that is where the moon and the sun reside, right? Out in the ethos. So I'm not saying that that's heaven because that's not what's described later in the text. I know that, but that's just a thought. I just want to share some of the thoughts that come to me as I'm reading this. And then, you know, once I got into like chapter 2, which is the story of God moving on from creating the earth to creating man and woman. And I got to thinking about God. Well, here was another thought actually before I move on to chapters 2 and 3. Chapter 1 verse 29, it says this, and I know people will feel differently about this, but I just want to unpack this as I continue on this journey. So chapter 1 verse 29 says, and God said, see, I have given you every herb that yields seed, which is on the face of all the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed. To you it shall be for food. So my question was, do y'all think that means we're all supposed to be vegan? I'm not saying right or wrong. I've discussed this with friends, and friends have sent me later Bible chapters which discuss other things. But it got me to thinking, because at this point in time, Adam and Eve are in Eden, right? This Garden of Eden, this perfect place. And God is saying this is his fruit. So I'm thinking of like when they're in a pure state, they get to eat the fruit from these trees. But then, you know, once they get kicked out later on, maybe they're permitted to eat other things because they themselves are no longer able to access that space of like true purity, so they cannot eat just of the pure foods. It's just a thought, y'all. It's just a thought. But then it also, once we get to chapter 2, and God says to them, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. And so for me, I was like, maybe it's just a spiritual death, right? It obviously wasn't an actual death, but maybe Eden was a garden of peace and purity, and eating of the tree of good and evil corrupts the soul and taints the spirit, and humans are no longer pure. And so I was thinking of it more in that sense. And obviously there's tons out there. I've also been watching videos and breakdowns, and I just want to give my own thoughts though, and not from a religious standpoint. This is someone who appreciates spirituality and books and literature and just what it says to me. And so that was just a thought, right? But then we get into chapter 3, and I really just want to read y'all some of my notes. So some of these notes are actually older. I've started on the journey of reading the Bible in completion before and did not finish. So I just want to share some of them because they really made me laugh. But in chapter 3, it's the temptation of fall of man. So, you know, this is the serpent tells Eve, you should eat of this tree and it'll give you knowledge and all of these things, and they do it. So this is when God comes back and God's like, Adam, where are you? And Adam says this. So he said, I heard your voice in the garden and I was afraid because I was naked and I hid myself. And y'all, in my notes, I have Adam slow. Because why would you say that? You're supposed to be knowledgeable now. Like, obviously God is gonna know something's up, because God is like, who told you were naked? So that was just a funny tidbit to me. But this story I always think of as just interesting. I don't know, I kind of wish it would have been expounded on a bit more of like the thought process of these individuals when it was happening. I can imagine the conversations they're in, but just curious. Or here I have a note that says, gonna be a no for me, dog. And this is when God is talking to Eve and he says, I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be for your husband and he shall rule over you. I was like, it's a no for me, dog. And then here, this made me laugh because in the end God made them clothes, and it says, also for Adam and his wife, the Lord made tunics of skin and clothed them after he tells them that they can no longer be in the Garden of Eden, for they may eat of the tree of life and be immortal. And so I was like, that was nice. Like, and then finally, you know, God is like, you gotta go. The same thing about with the tree of like life that would have given them immortal life. And I was curious, why didn't God want Adam to be immortal? And so I've only read those 3. Those are just some of my like thoughts as I go through, but I am curious in the larger sense, right? And I know some people disagree with my take about Genesis 1:29, but like some Hebrew Israelites actually believe that. I've been reading and understanding different people's interpretation of all of this. So I'm just curious how you all feel, how you interpret it. What are your thoughts? If you're really religious, share your thoughts. If you're not religious and you don't really know, you can share that as well. I don't want to get into debates. I don't want to get into arguments. I just want us all to like have analyzing conversations about it from our own experiences and perspectives. That's it. So just conversation. I am curious. I am going to continue reading it and hopefully share. I've always wanted to discuss religious texts on the channel, but I know it can be a very contentious topic and I don't want it to be. I just want us all to analyze it and think about what it means in our lives. If it means anything in your life, what do you think the purpose of it was at that time in which it came out? Was it a guide? Do you think of it as a fable? Do you interpret this literally? That's a big conversation as well. Genesis is to be interpreted literally. And so I'm just curious. I just love to discuss books and all of the books. So please let me know your thoughts and comments below. I'll continue to share as I continue to read. And I hope that maybe some of you will join me on the journey. As always, I am MsMalcolmHughes, one who believes that books are sometimes better than people. And until the next one, please remember to give time, to be kind to each other, and to have the very best day of your life on purpose. Peace, adabo, adios, ciao.